demonstration number 3. And we're still on the concept of density. And so what I have here is I have 2 balloons. And we know about balloons. They sort of bounce around and things like that when we blow them up and we hit them up in the air, but they eventually do sink. And the reason is that because they're more dense. They're more dense than the air around them. So when we take the balloon and the gas inside of the balloon, and if you blew it up, it's more dense because we know eventually the balloon will fall back to the ground. So what I have here is 2 balloons. And one of them is more dense and one of them is less dense. And I would like you to sort of tell me which one it is. Okay, so the one that's more dense, what would it do in air? If it was more dense, what would it do? Would it float to the top or would it go to the bottom? Would it sink? And hopefully you know from our previous demonstrations that the things that are more dense will always, always go to the bottom. So if I take this balloon here, this big balloon, and let it go, you should be able to tell me what it is. It's either more dense or less than air. Whoops. It's less dense because it was able to float to the top of the roof here. And actually that's our helium balloon, and some of you have experiences with helium balloons, especially the parents where you tie the helium balloon to your son or daughter's arm and they go outside and the balloon, the wind takes it and the balloon goes flying away because it's less dense. It would be easier if we had balloons that were more dense, like this one. And that balloon is filled with a denser gas. And you saw it sank. It sank really quickly. And so maybe if we had just, our balloons are, with the ribbon and stuff, and we could just, drag them along the ground, we wouldn't have all these tears when our balloon goes flying away when we go to a restaurant and they give us a balloon. So what I want to do is I want to talk to you again. I'm going to do this experiment like I did the week before using vinegar and carbon dioxide gas. And we know from that experience is that I'm going to hold the gas. I'm going to have a 2-liter container that's cut here, and I'm going to collect the gas like this, not like this. If the gas was less dense, it would get trapped up here. But if it's less dense here, I would do if I would make something that was less dense, it would just escape into the air. But since we know that CO2 is more dense than air, I'm going to hold the container in like this. And so I'm going to use a little baking soda here. And I'm going to use a little vinegar, and we're going to get some bubbling action there. And the bubbling action that I get is CO2 gas. So it's bubbling away there and it's producing CO2. And because it's greater, it has a greater density in air, it's trapped inside this bottle. But one of the things that we may not know about carbon dioxide gas, CO2 gas, is that it puts out flames. And I want to show you that. If I could get Missy, my unbelievable helper here, to light my candle. And this is high-tech stuff. I taped a candle to a meter stick, or actually it is a meter stick. You can, if you want a yardstick, you can get those at garage sales or those yard sales, because they sell yardsticks. But let's see how much gas is in there and see what happens to my flame as I put it in. And do you see? It went out immediately. And so by putting that in there, we could tell that CO2 gas was made here. We could say that it puts out flame. And we could also tell that it's about this amount here, because that's where the flame went out. Should we show you that to you again so you can see that? Now what I want to do before I do that is I have 2 other containers here. And those containers do not have CO2 gas in them. And you can see that, I think, because the candle stays lit in those. But as soon as I put this in this container, you can see that it goes out. So CO2 is not only more dense than air, it also puts out flame. And sometimes, especially your parents might have heard of CO2 fire extinguishers. But the coolest thing about gases is that they're like water, they're like liquids, they're able to be poured, they're fluids. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this gas and pour it into my container. I'm not going to pour the liquid or the solid. So right now, that gas is getting poured into my container here. And you know what? I'm going to do it again. I'm going to take this container and pour it into that one. I don't have to be so careful without pouring the liquid or the solid in there, because I don't have it. I just have the gas. All right. One more time with the candle. And so now this container is the one with the CO2 gas in it. More dense than air, so it's trapped inside of this container. But what we know about this is that it puts out flame. So let's see what happens when I put the flame in this one. But before, we did it before and it didn't do anything. It stayed lit. Now you can see it stays lit again. Let's try it again. Let me make a little bit more CO2 gas. A little bit more in there. Let's see if we have any CO2 gas in here. Oh. All right, let's see if we can do a better job at this one. Whoa. It's a little bit more. I'm going to be really careful and not breathe on it. And just pour that gas in there. Let's see if I can get any of that into here. Did you see that? Went out immediately. I'm going to ask Missy to light it one more time. And this gas that we cannot see, I'm going to take it and see if I can pour it into this one. Let's see if this works. And you can see that the candle goes out. Because I didn't pour the liquid or the solid, I poured the gas, the CO2 from this one that puts out flame because it's also more dense, two properties of CO2 gas. I poured it in this one, put the candle out, I poured it in this one. So gases are like fluids too. They're like liquids, they're like water. You could pour them and they flow out. So that's pretty cool. So just remember, CO2, the gas that we breathe out, part of it that we breathe out, has a lot of properties. Sort of pretty cool about CO2 gas. Now I said it's pretty cool. What I'm going to do is my next demonstration next week is something that's really cool. Make sure you remember that. It's really cool. I am going to show you what dry ice is and talk about dry ice next week. So peace be with you. Have fun. Be safe today.